Oftentimes, a game's protagonist or story is only as good as the villain that opposes it all, and this means countless games really try to focus on creating memorable and engaging main enemies. But it's rare that villains in games are actually pulled off well, and even more rare that they are pulled off so well that they basically become the main character themselves, with the player potentially even rooting for them over the good guys because of how funny and charismatic the villain really is. In terms of adversaries like this though, there may be no better out there than Handsome Jack from the Borderlands series. You see, the main game people know this daring devil from is Borderlands 2, and that's because in this installment, you actually go up against Jack as the main villain in the game, where even from the moment you start playing, he is antagonizing you. But unlike other villains that simply make you want to kill or ignore them, Handsome Jack is so unbelievably charismatic and hilarious from literally the first second you see him that you'll likely be playing the entire game hoping he hops back on the radio to say something crazy to you at any moment. I mean, seriously, watch this and try not to smile or be in awe at the utter absurdity.
Oh hey, you're in the preserve. I was gonna do this whole thing where I'd lure you in here and kill you, but you just kind of showed up. Thanks for saving me the trouble, kiddo. Ghost King spell. Booyah!
3, 2, 1, dance time!
That's some dance miracles.
Oh, he, just exploded, didn't he? I guess that's kinda like dancing.
You are such a jackass.
But the thing is, Jack isn't just a bad person, he is maniacal, scheming, and also maybe batshit crazy. He will constantly be coming up with little side stories or one-offs, like the time he is heard talking to a woman in a pedantic tone who just lost her husband, only to, as he is saying sorry, shoot her in the head and laugh that she is now with him at least.
Oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I just, forgive me. Where's your husband now?
He's dead.
That is a heartbreaker. But you got something in common with him now, at least.
And as horrible as these things are, the way in which Jack laughs and pokes fun at the terrifying things happening almost makes them seem okay. For as bad and evil as he is, it's hard to turn away or stop listening to everything he has to say because he says it in an unrelentingly charismatic way. The true strength of the character too, though, comes from the softer sides we see to him as well. Like when during the Angel Core boss fight in the second game, he breaks down trying to protect his daughter despite all the pain that she caused him earlier in life. Because you see, Jack in many ways isn't evil for evil's sake, even when he tries to make it seem like it. He's a personality born of happenstance. In other titles like Tales from the Borderlands, we get to learn more about Jack's abusive childhood, how his grandmother treated him horribly after he lost his father, and how his own daughter killed his wife. He is a man that has been subject to intense bouts of pain and horror, and from his vantage point, he simply wants to gain power to make sure that no one else can ever take away his again. And while this results in him doing heinous things and laughing about it, boy if he doesn't make us laugh too. And he's actually a perfect example that no matter what you do, if you do it in a funny and endearing enough way, some people will like you. I can't tell you how many quests and moments in Borderlands 2 specifically had me rolling on the floor laughing because of things that Handsome Jack would do or say. So much so that I barely even remember the heroes of the journey, but distinctly remember exact quotes from Handsome Jack throughout the entire runtime. He's a villain so ridiculous and so hilarious that you can't help but fall in love in a way, even though he's evil to his core. Because while other villains tend to do evil things in order to make you dislike them, Jack does them in a way that feels believable to his utterly insane caricature of himself. And this all results in one of the most memorable and captivating villains and characters in games, where you will strangely not only want to make him shut up and stop him, but also you'll be begging for him to come back and make you laugh again. In a way, he's the perfect kind of villain for the Borderlands setting as well, as absurd as it can get, and single-handedly shines in a series that otherwise is home to so much shoddy writing as of late. If you ask most people who the best character in the Portal series is, they would probably answer GLaDOS. She is one of the most recognizable villains in gaming history, and over the span of 2 games turns out to have a lot of depth and intrigue that has made her a timeless adversary that people remember fondly all these years later. But for me, there actually is one other character in Portal 2 specifically that I think is not only more unique, interesting, and funny, but also even more compelling than GLaDOS herself. None other than this adorable companion cube with an insecure persona, Wheatley. First of all, it's so rare in games that we see comedy pulled off so well like this.
Now, you've been under for quite a lot longer, and it's not out of the question that you might have a very minor case of serious brain damage.
It's clear that he will be stealing the scene every time he shows up. Sporting a breathtaking British accent and impeccable cadence, he is as lovable and goofy as he is stupid and annoying. And because of this, he comes off as unconfident with everything to prove. And boy, does it work. He perfectly fits into the mold of what makes Portal so great as a game, and even enhances it by adding some much needed new style of humor to contrast GLaDOS's more emotionless delivery. There's so many times in your journey in Portal 2 where you will be trying to solve a puzzle and keep getting distracted by some idiotic thing Wheatley is saying that forces a smirk onto your face. And for as annoying as he is, it's hard not to enjoy every moment he's around despite all the crazy antics he gets into that screw you over. The real turning point for this little talking ball though comes later in the game when he is about to help you escape. GLaDOS makes fun of him for not being helpful at all, and this bruises little Wheatley's fragile ego so bad that he becomes enraged and corrupted, and just like that, becomes the main villain of the game, turning GLaDOS into a talking potato whom you now get to work with. It's such an absurd and ridiculous premise, but because of all of the setup before, it really works, especially because of how believable it is that of all people, Wheatley would be the one to have such a bruised ego that he would do anything to prove everyone wrong. And after this moment, he starts to rename things like Aperture Laboratories to Wheatley Laboratories instead, and begins changing up the test chambers to be more like what he likes, which results in new puzzles and obstacles to overcome. Not only is this a change of pace from what you're used to gameplay wise, but it perfectly accentuates just how petty and fragile Wheatley's ego really is, which makes the conversations between you, him, and GLaDOS the entire way onward that much more funny. Whereas most villains in games become so iconic because of their immense strength and capabilities, Wheatley himself is practically defined by being inept and by his lack of ability to do anything right, with a growing anger at being called out for it that make him so unforgettable and compelling. On one hand, you want to turn off his annoying and hilarious British accent and save yourself from the hell he's putting you through, but on another, you can't help but deep down root for the little guy that everyone's been making fun of to finally prove them all wrong. A villain that's so bad at being the villain that you actually want them to win. How ironic. And really, more than any of that, what makes Wheatley so interesting as a character is just how much he adds to the whole dynamic of the entire game. I seriously think every single scene with this robot becomes better because he's in it, whether it's endearing, funny, or terrifying. And he's just the perfect juxtaposition to someone like GLaDOS, who is otherwise a much more standard villain that is fearsome in her own right. In fact, even the ending boss battle with Wheatley and the whole sequence creating a portal on the moon and stopping him is so fantastic. And it really just shows that even dopey personas like Wheatley can be at the heart of such great action sequences. And at the end of the day, he's a perfect example that in many ways, villains can be more than just evil, scary, and an opposing force for the protagonist to go up against. Sometimes the most compelling characters, the most intriguing villains, actually just have a personality so distinct and unique to themselves that the power of that overwhelms any common need for a specific story setup and writing style that are more standard. Without question, Wheatley is one of the most memorable villains of all time, not only because of how well written and funny he is, but because he goes against all conventions and transcends them to become the type of character that almost is not a good or bad guy alike, but just a force of nature that you can't help and get swept up by. And what could you ask for more than that in any character in the games we love? For some reason, religion seems to be a topic that most games and their characters seldom dive into in any sort of meaningful manner. It's almost like developers are scared to talk about it, or when they do, it seems so hollow and uninteresting. But there is one character that, against the odds, gives us an impression of faith and belief that might just have you wondering too. And that character is Joshua Graham from the Fallout New Vegas DLC, Honest Hearts. You originally get to the start of this questline by traveling to Zion Canyon National Park in Utah, where you are met with a band of warring tribes and feral outlaws alike. You have the White-Leg Savages, who are killing in service to Caesar's Legion, one of the main factions from the base game who harbor slaves and all serve a dogmatic dictator named Caesar, battling against the Sorrows and the Dead Horse tribe members, who specifically are led by a man named Joshua Graham. When you first meet Joshua though, he is checking dozens of guns on a table, and he asks that you help him out against the White-Leg people, a seemingly very personal mission of his own. But while talking with Graham, you also notice many other things as well. For one, his entire body is covered in bandages. He suffers in pain every moment of his life, and due to strict religious beliefs and doctrines, refuses to take medical chems to shroud the pain beneath him. And later on down the questline, if you inquire more about this, he explains that he once worked under Caesar and committed heinous acts of violence and destruction, all in the name of a cause worth nothing. When younger, he left his religious sect of New Canaanites in the world and stumbled upon Caesar before he was even known by that name, and was swept up by his charismatic leadership. But because of mistakes he made, he was betrayed. Caesar kills Joshua's family in front of him and sets him on fire, throwing him down a massive canyon and breaking his bones. However, in these final moments for Joshua, he had only one thing to rely on to save him: the love of God and of his people. So by some strange miracle or happenstance of faith, Joshua manages to rise from his broken and flame-ridden body, surviving and finding faith again as a new Canaanite, an analogy to the Mormons in our real life, and returns back to his original people, after which he takes an oath to his God that he will serve in his name forever and never become lost again. He forgave those who wronged him, and in turn was forgiven for his own sins, given another chance at life, living by the creed of his people, that by giving into the word of God and his laws, they can be given eternal salvation in the end. Despite this horrifying story though, by the time you meet him, Joshua still seems to be driven, at least in part, by that rage and need for revenge like before. In fact, at the very end of the DLC, Joshua even asks that you stand by his side as you slaughter countless members of the White-Leg tribe, leading the Dead Horse and Sorrows people in an all-out assault on the tribe, with thoughtless killing in your and Joshua's wake. And after fighting your way into the heart of this enemy territory, you were met by their fearsome leader, Salt Upon Wounds, who now cowers in the face of Joshua on his knees, just like Joshua did so many years ago. But Joshua in his hate-fueled rage wants nothing more than revenge, and it's only if you have a high enough speech skill that you can talk him out of it and lead yourself down the path of the best ending to the DLC, where Joshua comes to his senses and realizes that he is wrong, that only by putting his faith in a God he believes in so deeply will the White-Leg peoples and their leaders truly be met with what they deserve. So he looks at Salt in the Wound in the eyes and lets him go, all while the canyon returns to some semblance of normalcy, with at least a partial version of the Sorrows and other innocents still intact. Only by remaining strong in his faith, in his absolute devotion to God, even in the face of people who support the killers of his own family and body alike, can Joshua find true salvation. And it's this story and Joshua's character that show so perfectly the deepest struggles of faith, of believing in a God when it feels like he has at points abandoned you, or turning the other cheek when your most hated enemy gets to walk and see another day after slaughtering so many of those you love. Because you see, faith isn't an easy thing, but as Joshua shows, it's something that can lead to a life of even greater purpose, and also more love and happiness in a world even when it's devoid of it almost entirely. And as someone that's not even religious myself, what a powerful message that is. But I'll let Joshua have the final words, with his best quote from the entire DLC, and one that speaks volumes more than the rapid nature in which it's spoken could ever express. I have been baptized twice, once in water, once in flame. I will carry the fire of the Holy Spirit inside until I stand before my Lord in judgment. It really does feel like everyone loves a great dynamic duo of video game characters. Teams like Joel and Ellie, Kratos and Atreus, Ratchet and Clank, or Mario and Luigi. And while all these characters and their friendship or love alike are fantastic in their own right, there is a specific duo of characters in games that is beyond underrated and seldom talked about. A brother and sister that fight tooth and nail to the bitter end, and along the way have some of the most profound and emotional moments out there. And that pair is Amicia de Rune and her baby brother Hugo from the Plague Tale series. You see, these games never really got the recognition they deserve, probably in large part due to the slow gameplay with little intrigue and heavy focus on the narrative. But nonetheless, the series is host to some of the best characters out there, most of all, Amicia. Because Amicia is a woman who is willing to sacrifice literally everything in her life for the one she loves, most of all Hugo. Near the beginning of the first game, a plague has broken out with rat infestations that are taking over major cities in France, and Hugo and Amicia are separated from the rest of their family, forced to fend for themselves all along the countryside and in towns alike. They come up against wildlife, guards, and sadistic people all over. And throughout the journey in both games, because of how young Hugo is, almost all of the responsibility for their survival falls on Amicia. She has to help Hugo hide, save him from danger, and navigate tumultuous relationships with other groups to make sure Hugo doesn't get hurt. Most impressive of all, though, is how strong Amicia stays through it all. For example, there are multiple moments in the second game specifically where we watch as Amicia simply falls to the ground broken and tired, crying into her arms at the hell she has been put through. But then, when she looks up and sees Hugo helpless in another room or alone, she always gathers the strength to make sure he's safe yet again. Because you see, Hugo is a very special boy, not just a brother to Amicia, but also a fabled child of the macula, the blood disease taking over the region and killing so many. Hugo quite literally can speak to the entity and control it, gaining the ability to turn entire hordes of rats against foes to aid Amicia. But each time he does this, Hugo falls deeper and deeper into the macula's grasp, and thus deeper and deeper into madness itself. So Amicia tries as hard as she can to handle things on her own without Hugo getting involved. But eventually, as things get more heated, she is captured and presumably killed, after which Hugo, in a bout of rage and revenge, fully gives himself to the macula to avenge his sister he loves so dearly. The world is thrust into chaos as entire cities are toppled, and Amicia must make her way to the center of the macula and Hugo's power to confront him head on. But as she does, it becomes more and more clear that Hugo is too far gone, and with no chance to save him, when Amicia has one last chance to talk to Hugo, it becomes clear that she must kill him. And whether you decide to kill Hugo as Amicia in the end or have Lucas, your companion, do it, it brings a tragic end to the tale of these two inseparable characters. More than anything though, this entire series is so beyond underrated, with unforgettable set pieces and moments that rival other much bigger budget affairs like Uncharted, along with fantastic fantasy and sci-fi elements intertwined. And at the center of it all is Amicia, a girl unwilling to give up no matter which odds are stacked against her, and all the more powerful because of the journey she goes on, protecting her little brother at all costs. In the first game, she is more timid and scared, unable to take on basic combat encounters in the simplest of ways. However, by the end of the second game, she is a seasoned fighter, more violent and capable, but still with the loving heart she began the story with. She is as tragic a hero as she is inspiring, and the fact that she has to turn against the person she cared about most in the end, while horrible, is the perfect fitting conclusion to the start of her arc as a person. A journey about becoming the strongest person in the room, not because you want to, but because you have to. Rising to the occasion in the service of others at the expense of yourself, even when in the end you lose it all. It all makes you feel such an apprehension and sense of respect for Amicia and what she has to go through, and also results in some of the most heartfelt, somber, and inspiring moments in games history. Truly, if you have never played the Plague Tale series, give the games a shot to see why Amicia sits atop a throne of so many other notable characters people love. And she's without a doubt one of the most compelling people in the medium of all time, and deserves so much more love and analysis than she's gotten.